Well, a lot of times in life when things don't go the way we want, human nature and the tendency of most of us, or a lot of us, is to blame somebody. And in boxing, we see so many situations where you have different parties all saying certain things, and we have to sit there and cipher through what is true and what appears to be not so true. Um, Instead of really just looking at the whole thing objectively and being pragmatic about it and saying to ourselves, well, you know what? Everybody has their own version of the truth, and people have a tendency to exaggerate things or maybe even mislead others. Promoters have said many things, and when you go back and research what they say, many times they contradict later what they said prior. And this is how boxing's always been. Obviously, a fighter or a fighter's camp is going to do and say what's best for themselves. And you hear, people saying, or fighters saying, and people from their camp saying that, you know what, it's not about the money, it's about the titles, it's about pride, it's about honor, it's about this and it's about that. And you have these so-called specific fighters coming out and just saying that they're the people's champion, and it's about legacy more so than money. But at the end of the day, money always finds a way to work its way into people's motives. So I think all fighters care about the money, regardless of what they say. I know there's been situations where maybe fighters have taken less money because maybe they did want to become champion, and they made concessions because they believed that, once they got the belt, that they can go on to make more money, and they can go on to be able to dictate terms to other fighters once they become the champion, and once they put themselves in a situation that, hey, I've beaten the best, so now I'm the best, I can dictate terms. So at the end of the day, as much as we hate to talk about the business side of boxing really hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is because everything is out there in social media, we hear more things about the business side. We have different outlets, and it's more accessible to us to know the business side of the sport, and what's going on behind the scenes. Whereas before, all these things were going on behind the scenes, but because of the lack of social media, and because these things weren't always being talked about by the fighters themselves, then we didn't really know about it. So when you hear people complain about why do we talk about the business side of boxing, we should just only care about the fights, we should just care about, but it's hard to not talk about the business side of the sport when the fighters themselves are always talking about the business side of the sport. As time has gone on in the sport, fighters have, become more educated in the sport and realize that it is a business, it's their job, and they have to really understand how to maximize their value. They have to understand how to read contracts and put themselves in the best situation possible, because at the end of the day, there is no pension fund for boxers, there is no 401k for boxers. It is what it is. So let's talk about this Gennady Golovkin situation with Canelo Alvarez and with Billy Joe Saunders, because it's been talked about a lot in boxing right now. It's been in a lot of people's headlines. People have boxing websites, people on YouTube talking about it a lot. And I want to chime in on this a little bit, because you hear people taking sides here. Gennady Golovkin should just accept what Canelo Alvarez offers him, because Canelo Alvarez is the A side. And then also people are criticizing Canelo Alvarez for not, upholding that perception of the Mexican fighter, fighting for honor, not being afraid to fight anyone, just putting it on the line and just wanting to be the best. And it doesn't really matter about the money. So Canelo Alvarez is being criticized for that. Billy Joe Saunders always seems to be calling out Gennady Golovkin at specific times, whether or not Gennady Golovkin has a fight signed. You see Billy Joe Saunders start, coming out with these statements, jumping in the headlines, start saying things about Gennady Golovkin, calling Gennady Golovkin out when he already has a fight signed. And, now he's calling Gennady Golovkin out after the fight with Daniel Jacobs. And obviously Daniel Jacobs did better than a lot of people had expected. So maybe Billy Joe Saunders thinks that this is the right time to probably want to jump on a Gennady Golovkin fight. So let's just look at all the sides here and kind of dissect and go through the whole series of events, leading up to this debacle that we have right now. Because a lot of people compare this to Mayweather Pacquiao, and in that whole situation, there was a divide in boxing. A lot of people, 50% seem to be on Manny Pacquiao's side, 50% seem to be on Floyd Mayweather's side. And I myself, I had a hard time figuring out who was at fault. Originally, I thought it was Pacquiao's fault. Then I started blaming Mayweather because Mayweather's always being asked about the fight. He never wanted to talk about it. So then I kind of said to myself, well, maybe he doesn't want the fight. And then after a while, I started blaming Pacquiao again when Mayweather said that he has no problem fighting Pacquiao. So it's been back and forth. Both sides have said things that you could probably question. So it's really hard to figure out who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. And it's really hard to sit there and narrow it down to just one side being at fault. And this is another situation where I believe that it's hard to really just sit there and say that one side is 100% right and the other side is 100% wrong in regards to all three of these fighters. Now, let's take a look at what Canelo Alvarez has done. He was the WBC middleweight champion, and he was going to be mandated by the WBC to fight Gennady Golovkin. And then he decided to vacate the title and then drop back down to junior middleweight and fight for a junior middleweight title. So right that there in itself suggests, obviously, that Canelo Alvarez did not want to fight Gennady Golovkin. And their side of the story was, it wasn't about the belt for them. It was about the fight itself. It didn't matter whether or not Canelo Alvarez was WBC champion or not. It was about Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo Alvarez getting the fight on their terms when they wanted it to happen. So it seemed like it was more of an ego thing. But again, you have to question too, why would someone vacate a title? Because if you look at the great champions of old, Bernard Hopkins in particular, he fought every mandatory that he was supposed to fight, that he was asked to fight by the organization. He never vacated a title, to my knowledge. I can't remember him ever vacating a title when a mandatory was enforced. So let's look at Gennady Golovkin now, and let's look at some of the things that happened on that side. Now, Oscar De La Hoya later on, it's been out there, it's put out there, and it's not been refuted, it hasn't been retracted, and it hasn't been disproven that Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions did offer Gennady Golovkin $15 million. And I guess there was a situation with the pay-per-view cut, and that's why that offer was not accepted by Team Golovkin. So why was that offer not accepted? If Gennady Golovkin doesn't really care about money, he cares about, fighting the best, supposedly. And, Tom Loeffler has never denied that offer being put on the table, and Tom Loeffler has never denied negotiating with Golden Boy Promotions for this fight. And he's even admitted that they're negotiating right now. And they have been talking about a fight right now. So, who's wrong and who's right for this fight not happening? Because Gennady Golovkin, $15 million. I mean, the most he's ever made is $5 million. So they offered him 3 times what he was supposed to get, or what he's gotten in the past. So whose fault is that? And who's telling the truth? Again, Tom Loeffler did not deny that offer, but for whatever reason, they did not like other things in the contract, whether it be the pay-per-view cut or what have you. I don't know. They've said that they were going to not be allowed any cut of the pay-per-view, or they didn't like the percentage that was being offered to them. I don't know 100% sure, and I don't think we know 100% sure factually, all of the intricacies of that contract. But let's take a look at Billy Joe Saunders, who has always seemed to drop Gennady Golovkin's name out there and try to say that he's not afraid of Gennady Golovkin or concerned about fighting Gennady Golovkin. But let's look back to the press conference where he himself said after one of his fights that he and Chris Eubank Jr., he believed, could not beat Gennady Golovkin. And that's the first time in my life I've ever heard a champion admit that he could not beat another fighter in his division. So if you really believe that you can beat Gennady Golovkin and you really wanted to fight Gennady Golovkin, then why hasn't it happened yet? Okay. And why did you say that you believe he can beat you? Because right then and there, that smashes your credibility apart as a champion. I mean, Canelo Alvarez has never said something like that. Whether or not deep down inside he thinks he can win or not, we don't know. We don't know if it's his team that's advising him not to take the fight at this particular time. We don't know that, but when you hear Billy Joe Saunders openly say that he doesn't believe he can beat Gennady Golovkin, then that's going to throw a red flag up there. And then also with Abel Sanchez, talking about now if they cannot get this title unified, then they're going to move up to 168. When before, there was a proposed fight at 164 with Andre Ward, which was not denied by Team Golovkin. The only thing we don't know about is, what was the terms of that contract, because Team Ward had said they sent the contract over. Team Loeffler never denied that. They may have denied, what was written in that contract or what was put forth in that contract, but they never denied that, a contract was not sent over. So why is it okay to move up to 168 now? Because again, the titles still are not being unified, okay? And Gennady Golovkin can still easily make middleweight. So why is now the right time to move to 168 now that Andre Ward is up at 175? You have to think about that. So you could sit there and look at each and every fighter in this situation, and you could point out things that just don't jive well and just don't sound right, and just kind of put it out there that maybe there's blame to go around for all parties involved here, because again, Gennady Golovkin really doesn't say much. It's usually Tom Loeffler or it's Abel Sanchez. And it reminds me of the Pacquiao situation when Pacquiao never really said much and Freddie Roach was always the antagonist. He was always the guy that would make those controversial statements. And, it's the same situation now with Abel Sanchez. But the thing is Gennady Golovkin's not coming out and saying, well, that's just what Abel thinks. That's not what I think. So he's not refuting anything that his team is saying. And Pacquiao never really refuted anything his team was saying. Situations like with Floyd Mayweather, every now and then, Floyd Mayweather Sr. or Roger Mayweather would be interviewed and they'd say something, and then Floyd would be asked about what they said, and he would just openly say, well, that's their opinion. That's not mine. You don't have to listen to them. Listen to me, what I say. And in a situation with Pacquiao and in a situation with Golovkin, these guys never step up and really speak. And when Gennady Golovkin was asked about the Andre Ward situation, he said he had no problem fighting Andre Ward. But for whatever reason, the fight never happened. So why is it okay to move up to 168 now? Why are they talking about that now? Why do they still want to fight Canelo Alvarez if their main objective was to unify the middleweight titles? Canelo Alvarez doesn't have a middleweight title. He has a junior middleweight title now. So why do they still want to fight him? And why now are they coming out and saying that they're injured? And now, they can't fight Billy Joe Saunders, or it's being put out there that they can't fight Billy Joe Saunders according to Frank Warren, but there's never been a statement released from Team Loeffler yet, so we have to give Team Golovkin yet. Tom Loeffler has never released a statement questioning or saying that Frank Warren is not telling the truth. So if they weren't injured, then they would come right out and say, well, Frank Warren is wrong, but they're not refuting Frank Warren's statements. So it's just hard to really blame just one side here, because everyone has done something or said something that has given us an indication that they're not 100% on board with fighting each other. So now Golovkin's team supposedly is injured, and they waited this long to put out that he's injured. And, right after the Jacobs fight, they never said that Golovkin was injured. So now what are they doing? Are they waiting to see what happens in the Canelo fight so they could sit down and negotiate a fight with Canelo and just basically circumvent Billy Joe Saunders all of a sudden? So all of a sudden now, it's not about unifying the titles. Now it's about getting the biggest money fight you can. So the narrative keeps changing with Team Golovkin, and the narrative keeps changing with Billy Joe Saunders. And I don't know, Canelo Alvarez, they've pretty much been consistent. They've said that, you know what, we'll fight him when we want to fight him on our terms. Whether or not that's fair or not, whether or not you think that they're right for saying that, it is what it is. I mean, it's hard to not look at the situation with Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin and say that Team Alvarez does not have the leverage. I mean, it's just irrefutable when you look at what Team Alvarez has done, or Canelo Alvarez has done with pay-per-views. I mean, he fought Miguel Cotto 900,000 pay-per-view buys, and he's consistently done around 300,000 to 350,000 pay-per-view buys, whereas Gennady Golovkin has done 130, 150, 170, if you want to give him every benefit of the doubt, which is way less than what Canelo Alvarez has done. So it's no secret that Canelo Alvarez is the named fighter here. Whether or not he's the best fighter in the division, I don't think he is. I don't even think that he beats Golovkin. I don't think he fights anything like Daniel Jacobs. I don't think Billy Joe Saunders is exactly the same type of fighter that Daniel Jacobs is either. He's not as big. I don't think he hits as hard, and I don't think he's as strong, and I don't even think he's as quick as Daniel Jacobs. So in my own humble opinion, I think Golovkin beats both guys, but I still wouldn't mind seeing the fights. So, you could sit there and say what you want about each person involved in here, but I have to be honest, it's like there's enough blame to go around for everyone here, just like I thought that same way, with Mayweather Pacquiao. But one thing I have to honestly say, if Team Golovkin thinks that they have any leverage over Canelo Alvarez just because they're the champion, then I think they're wrong, because there's been many situations where the champion has not been the more popular fighter, and the more popular fighter who is not the champion has been able to dictate terms to the champion. So just based upon the perception of Gennady Golovkin being the more accomplished fighter at middleweight, being the better fighter, and because he's the unified champion, all those things are great, but for whatever reason, he just is not the bigger name fighter. And to come into a negotiation with Canelo Alvarez thinking that you're on equal footing, I think is wrong. I think it's ridiculous, and I just don't think that they have a leg to stand on. And just like Manny Pacquiao had to make concessions to Floyd Mayweather, basically Floyd Mayweather got everything he wanted, and the fight was made. I honestly think that if Canelo Alvarez and Golden Boy Promotions do not get everything they want, then this fight's not going to get made. And it is what it is. Should they have taken the $15 million offer? I think they should have. I really think they should have. Because, you beat Canelo Alvarez, and then you become the man. If they were so confident that they would beat Canelo Alvarez, why not take a purse that's triple what you got prior? And you only got 2.7 to fight a tougher fight, in my opinion, in Daniel Jacobs. So why would you not take a perceived easier fight, in my opinion? I don't know what everyone else thinks, but a perceived easier fight with Gennady Golovkin and make significantly more money. Think about it. And so now Oscar De La Hoya is saying that that $15 million offer is off the table. So I think the longer they wait to make a deal with Alvarez, the worse it's going to be for them. You know, I think the worse it's going to be for them, because just like I said this with the Manny Pacquiao Floyd Mayweather situation, if they both continue to fight and Floyd continued to pull in better pay-per-view numbers than Manny Pacquiao, then that's just more leverage for the Floyd Mayweather side. And if this Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight does anywhere near 1 million pay-per-view buys, or even does 700,000 pay-per-view buys, which I think it's going to do, then that's just going to strengthen their position. So the longer they wait to make this fight with Alvarez, I think it's going to be worse for Team Golovkin. Now, the Billy Joe Saunders situation, I think Golovkin is a bigger name than Billy Joe Saunders. I think people in America would agree with that as well. Maybe people in the UK would dispute that somewhat, but at the end of the day, they could do whatever they want with Billy Joe Saunders. I think they have the leverage in a fight against Billy Joe Saunders, and they pretty much would have a leverage against anyone else in the middleweight division, except Canelo Alvarez. So at the end of the day, this whole thing about unifying the titles, again, I don't think that's important, as they said. I think it was just something they could use at the time to not have to fight Andre Ward. That's just my personal opinion. You can disagree with me if you want. That's fine. But I just think that, at the end of the day, Gennady Golovkin fights for money, just like every other fighter out there. And, the perception out there of saying that he fights for honor, he fights for legacy, he fights for all these things, I don't disagree with that. But just because those things are, factor into the equation, let's not make no mistake about it. If he can get a mega fight with Canelo Alvarez, then that's going to trump all those things. So that's why I think they're starting to kind of look at it for what it is. And they realize themselves that the longer they wait, that the worse it's going to be for them at the negotiating table. Not only that, Gennady Golovkin is not getting any younger. He's had 2 fights now where people have kind of looked at it and said that he may be declining. So the longer they wait, it's just going to be worse for them. So now they're seeing the writing on the wall. So now they're going to try and make this big money fight now when they can, before it's too late. That's just my opinion. Billy Joe Saunders, I don't think that fight is that important to them. They can say what they want. I think that they're just kind of using that as, what, if we don't, just to say, if we don't have this Canelo fight, then we have this Billy Joe Saunders fight as a backup. But now it looks as though they're going to hold out and try to make this Canelo fight, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, I really do think the ball is in Team Golovkin's court here. And I think Canelo Alvarez is in the driver's seat. I honestly believe that. Whether it's fair or not, it is what it is. That's just how boxing's always been. The side that has the leverage obviously is going to use it. And I said this several times, that if you had it, if I had it, if anyone had it, if you look in the business world, you look at any other sector of life, anyone who has leverage uses it. So whether it's fair or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All right, guys. Well, that's all I got for now. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hate on this video. I know the Golovkin fans are going to come out in droves. That's just how I feel about the situation. Till next time, Beav is out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.